Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Smith and I am an extension economist in the Department of Ag and Applied Economics at the University of Georgia Tifton campus. Today I'm going to talk to you about a project titled Risk Preference and Economics of Best Management Practices to Improve Water Quality and Quantity in the Upper Floridian Aquifer. This is part of a grant project funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And the grant project is titled the Floridan Aquifer Collaborative Engagement for Sustainability. I would like to recognize my co-authors on this presentation, Ms. Rachel Judd, who is a graduate research assistant in the Department of Ag and Applied Economics at the University of Georgia. She's working on her master's degree. And my colleague, Dr. Yangxuan Liu, who is our cotton economist at the University of Georgia Tifton campus. Before we really get into the presentation, I would also like to acknowledge the work of several other people who provided an excellent foundation for this project for Rachel to take over. There's Guy Hancock, who received his master's, and this was part of his thesis project from UGA. We have Unmesh Karaila from the University of Florida, Ritesh Karki from Auburn, and Kevin Athern from the University of Florida. Of course, this project is a multi-state collaborative project with Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. And we have the University of Georgia involved, Auburn University, Albany State University, and the University of Florida Water Institute. I also want to mention that the results that are presented today are a work in progress and not yet peer-reviewed. So they are still a work in progress, and we are still conducting research, and that is ongoing. But once we get all of it completed, we do plan to have the work peer-reviewed and hopefully published in a few journal articles. All right, so to begin, I want to give you a background on the economics and the importance of agriculture to the region. The region that we're looking at as far as Georgia is concerned is the southwest Georgia, southwest corner of Georgia. And the estimated farm gate value for that area is over $5 billion. And that also counts part of the upper panhandle of Florida there and that little corner of Alabama as well. So that whole region of the Upper Floridian Aquifer, we're looking at ag production valued over $5 billion. So it's a huge industry to the area and economically vital to the region. Besides the production of the crops, you also have gins and peanut buying points and shelling facilities that are all in place. So there's infrastructure established, input suppliers and things like that. So beyond the agricultural production in the area, there's even more through value added. But definitely it's very important to the region. Also, water is under pressure. The state of Florida has some quality standards in place. The state of Georgia is looking at quantity and trying to see how we can manage our water most efficiently. So there's increased pressure on improving the quality of water in the area as well as the quantity that is demanded. In addition, as the population in the region increases in size, there's more demand on water from a quantity standpoint, as well as pressure to irrigate in the region. There's just a big demand for quantity of water. Water use and nutrient management are critical to securing the future of this resource in the region. So like Dr. Dwivedi showed earlier, there are a lot of objectives that we want to accomplish with this project. One of the project objectives that we're focusing on is looking at the on-farm economic impact of trying to figure out how we can most efficiently use water and improve water quality. So we're looking at agricultural production practices that do both of those things. And one of the ways that we're trying to figure out the economics of that is to use enterprise budgets and risk simulation software to figure out what the costs are, estimate what the revenues will be, and potential profits associated with those, and trying to figure out which level of conservation practices that improve water efficiency and water quality is going to be the most profitable and therefore most likely to be adopted by producers in the region. So as part of the project, we worked with stakeholders and county extension agents, extension specialists, researchers at the university level, government entities and things like that to come up with 3 different levels of implementation of water quality and conservation practices. And we looked at an intensive level called MS1, where they're implementing all of the best management practices, state-of-the-art, and things like that. We also have an estimate for MS2, typical implementation of best management practices, probably not adopting the most state-of-the-art, but putting in some because they're interested in conserving water and improving the quality of water. And then we have a 3rd level called minimal implementation of best management practices. Some examples of best management practices include strip tillage production to help reduce soil erosion, the use of soil moisture sensors to make sure that we're irrigating in a timely manner, also using irrigation management software to help farmers decide when is the best time to irrigate based on soil moisture deficit as well as the growth stage of the plant or the crop that they're looking at. And of course, nutrient management plans and cover crops are all part of that as well. I apologize that this is a very busy slide with a lot of words on it. But one way to break it down is to look at it in 3 different columns. We have MS1, which is the intensive, most fully adopted modern ag technology system. MS2 is in the middle, which is your typical, assumed to be the typical system. It's a mix of modern and conventional production practices. And then the 3rd column on the right is MS3, which is minimal. Going back to MS1, you can see the different practices that we're looking at, or the bundles of best management practices: strip tillage production, soil moisture sensors, irrigation management, soil testing and tissue sampling, direct application of fertilizer, and cover crops. MS2, they're not doing the strip tillage, they're looking at conventional tillage production, basic irrigation management strategies, maybe using a checkbook method as opposed to some really updated software system. They are soil testing, applying fertilizer direct, but not using a cover crop. And then in the 3rd system, they're putting out irrigation based on their experience. So maybe they're putting out irrigation regardless if the soil is deficit. But this is something that they've always done. And so they're not paying attention to the growth curve of the plant. Maybe they're irrigating because they see their neighbor irrigating. They don't soil test. They just disc in the fertilizer and don't plant a cover crop. So one of the first things that we did was to create enterprise budgets that were representative for the region as well as each level. And we had a basis of budgets with the University of Georgia row crop enterprise budgets that are created every year. And then we spoke with producers and extension specialists as well as county agents to come up with representative practices for the region and for each management system level. Again, those are MS level. We came up with a total cost and used that in our evaluation. A lot of times when we're working with producers and talking to them about making planting decisions, they just look at the variable cost. Can they cover what it costs to plant, grow, harvest, and market their crop? But in this evaluation, we wanted to look at the total cost because they're actually investing in things like soil moisture sensors and putting in the management time to run that irrigation management software. So we're looking at the total cost in this analysis. We also used the soil and water assessment tool, which is called SWOT, to estimate crop yields. And we came up with revenues based on simulated yields and current market prices. We also assume typical crop rotations for annual net returns on the farm. So we might be looking at a cotton peanut rotation and things like that. All right, so here let's take a look at the preliminary results that we have so far. And this is looking at the yield data based on the SWOT simulations. And in this first graph, we're looking at cotton. The graph on the right is peanuts. Let's first take a look at cotton. On this, we have Management System 1, here's Management System 2, and Management System 3. And looking at the differences in there, it looks like Management System 1 provided yields that were statistically significantly higher than Management System 2 and Management System 3. Between those two, there was no difference, but yields were higher for Management System 1 as far as cotton is concerned. Now taking a look at peanuts, there is no statistical difference between Management Systems 1, 2, and 3. So yields were similar across all three levels of management systems here. Let's also take a look at the costs that we have associated with these. Similar to the previous graph, we've got cotton in this graph here on the left, peanuts on the right, and MS1 is on the left, MS2 in the middle, and MS3 is on the right. And we have general fixed cost, and then the orange is best management fixed cost, so that's showing investment in those soil moisture sensors and things like that. We also have general variable costs between the two systems, and then you can see interest and marketing variable costs in the yellow. And then looking at the best management practices variable costs in the blue, and green, looking at irrigation variable cost as well as fertilizer variable cost. And you can see, compared to like MS1 and MS3, where the differences are more obvious, the best management practice variable costs and fixed costs are higher, but because they were more efficient in their fertilizer and irrigation, those are quite a bit lower. So we do see much higher fertilizer and irrigation costs in MS3 as compared to MS1. And looking at peanuts, we see a similar situation. The costs are higher for the best management practice fixed costs, but when we're looking at irrigation and fertilizer, those costs are significantly lower than MS3. So Georgia peanut saw the highest per acre production cost for MS3, and that was the same with cotton. They saw the highest per acre production cost for MS3 and the lowest for MS1. So the big question is, how does that affect profitability? So here's where we want to take a look at net returns. And so we look at the total revenues based on market price times yield and subtract those total costs. And here we're looking at the cotton peanut rotation. So we have 2 years of cotton, 1 year of peanut, and we annualized the information. So we're looking at one farm where 2/3 of the farm is planted to cotton and 1/3 of it is planted to peanuts. And it looks like MS1 has statistically significantly higher potential returns, higher net returns than MS2 and MS3. So there is more profit potential to adopting some of those best management practices. We also ran the similar situation for Florida, and we were looking at a corn peanut rotation in Florida. For Florida, we're looking at yields that are similar between the three management systems as far as corn is concerned, and the same with peanut. Yields are the same across the three management systems. There's no statistical difference between the three management systems as far as yield is concerned. Looking at the costs, again, we're seeing similar scenario that we saw in Florida. MS3 has the highest production cost and for corn, and the same scenario for peanuts. The one thing that is different for Florida is that MS2, both corn and peanuts, had lower total production costs than MS1. So let's take a look at the potential profitability, looking at the annual net returns per acre by management system for Florida, and we're looking at a corn peanut rotation, and we're looking at MS2 providing the most potential profit for producers in the region. So using the typical management systems or bundles of best management practices is providing the most profit potential. So that takes us to our conclusions, and we can conclude from this preliminary evaluation that adoption of best management practices does require more investment by the producer as far as capital and management is concerned. And so we do see higher costs as far as that investment is concerned. So fixed costs will generally be higher. Some of the management time will be higher as far as plugging in that data and information into the irrigation management system, checking those soil moisture sensors and things like that. But there are significant reductions in fertilizer costs and definitely more efficient water use, which can help improve yield and potentially reduce the amount of water that is put onto the crop. And so overall, we saw management systems 1 and 2 resulting in more profitability than management system 3. So the big takeaway is that farmers can implement conservation practices and potentially improve their profitability. So there is some evidence that we can win on all sides. We can improve water quality and quantity and still remain profitable to producers. So to talk about our next steps, we want to run scenarios with dynamic inputs and commodity prices. And we also want to take a look at simulating the yields and prices for cotton and peanut over a 30-year period for each management system. And so we're going to be working with Auburn University in modifying the SWOT model to come up with 30 years. Prior, we were looking at the crop rotation, and so we had 15 years of cotton, or 20 years of cotton, 10 years of peanuts. And now we're actually going to look at 30 years for each system to simulate different yields and look at more variation that way, and 30 years for each crop. We're also going to simulate prices using historical price data, and that will be helpful instead of just looking at one market price in time, because as we all know, commodity prices can vary quite a bit. Furthermore, we're going to look at simulated yield and prices and put those into the enterprise budget, again, to calculate the net returns. Once we do that, we plan to do a stochastic efficiency with respect to function and look at ordering the net returns based on certainty equivalence. And those are the amount of money that will make a decision maker indifferent between the value of that money and the risky alternative. So that's going to help us figure out what the risk preferences are for each management system. And that will be very insightful in helping try to figure out who's going to be more likely to adopt and implement these various conservation practices. So that takes me to the final slide. We have a website available for you to get more information. It's floridanwater.org, and you can also follow us on Twitter. And I believe I will be able to answer some questions after this panel is over, and I look forward to the discussion that we have there. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation, and I look forward to talking to you during the discussion period.